try this again. Good evening, everybody. It's Monday at 9:30 p.m. on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast. It's time for the Calamity Jane live stream. James, how you doing on this beautiful spring-ish evening?
On Monday.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just a Monday. Yeah.
it's just a Monday. Yeah, I wish I could
I mean, you
be
you're
cozy.
you're down in the general vicinity of the Los Angeles area, so pretty much every day is like the last. It's just
That's true.
the
It is nice
temperature
out here.
gets up and down a little bit, but other than that,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's yeah. I'd say we're spoiled out here in LA for that
yeah,
for
that
sure.
is very
For
true.
Southern California weather. But yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am not quite as blessed with Los Angeles, Southern California weather. Living in the Atlanta area, we're going through the typical spring random weather where you wake up one morning and it's like 50 degrees, 40 degrees, and then you wake
Hmm.
up the next morning and it's 85 degrees.
So is that typical of Georgia?
In the spring, it is. Yeah, spring is a really rough season in Georgia. It just doesn't know what it
Okay.
wants to be. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Right now, we're in. I think we're past most of the craziness, and we're making the long march into summer. So,
Hmm.
um, and I'm already counting down the days till fall.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. I guess yeah. Fall's a pretty. Being raised in Utah, fall's a pretty is a pretty season. So I'm
Sure.
spoiled with that one. But now in LA, you don't have any seasons really. So it's the
No.
one thing I do miss about being from a state that, well, at least being raised in a state that has multiple seasons. So I'm sure Georgia's really pretty in the
Yeah,
fall.
Georgia definitely has all of the seasons and then four more. Uh,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, fall in Georgia, particularly if you go north up into the mountains. Uh, it's quite beautiful. I mean, the trees change color, and you get those great autumn oranges and browns and yellows, and yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, it's a great place to be in fall, and the weather is perfect too. Like fall weather in Georgia is really great.
Cool.
So now that we've gotten the old man conversation of the weather out of the way, we've proven our old man credentials by spending an
Yeah.
inordinate amount of time talking about the weather.
Yeah.
Um,
That's true.
let's.
Um,
Why don't we talk about this cartoon that we're theoretically crafting?
okay. Sounds good. I'll go into share screen and I'll share where we left
All
off.
right.
So again, as it's been the ongoing saga, it seems like I get sort of self-conscious about this because I've been on Tinsel now for the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. It feels like,
Hmm.
trying to get her her face right. Um, but let's see where I'm at tonight.
I'm ready.
So
I'm super excited.
screen, and there we go.
Oh, look at that. That
So
is great. I
yeah,
love
so
it.
I
Yeah.
can't remember what you saw last. I mean, because again, we have our offline meeting where you and I talk.
Yeah. Now,
But
when our offline meeting, you didn't have the teeth in yet,
yeah,
or the horns actually.
yeah. So what do you think?
I think it looks fantastic. I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So again, this is where I can get obsessive about stuff, and I start going well, and I start needling stuff. But I think we're at a good spot with her. I'm just gonna do so tonight. All I'm gonna be doing is doing some smoothing stuff out a little bit and kind of
Mm-hmm.
just playing with the model a little bit. But her general form is done, and I'll be applying matte colors to her and stuff like that, and trying to get her polarized right to match up with Calamity. That's
Wonderful.
we'll go with. I'm still gonna model a little bit tonight, and then we'll go from there.
Wonderful. I mean, that really looks really impressive. I'm looking forward to seeing getting some of the color on the model and seeing how it takes shape.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it too. Like I said, I could sit here and critique it more and more, but again, this model, the details you're seeing, you're not going to see a lot of them because she is going to be flat shaded.
Mm-hmm.
But I am just I'm putting in some of the markers here to see if I can get some shadows in there here and there. But we'll see. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
That's very cool. That is very cool. It's just I don't know. I'm old enough to have grown up in the pre modern technology times, and you are too, of course.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, and I I don't know. A part of me feels like my niece and nephew, they're going to grow up in a world where this technology has always existed for them.
Uh-huh.
And I don't mean this judgmentally. I mean this purely as a thought exercise. Will something like this be mundane to them? Right? I look at this and I go, holy moly! Like how far we've come that we can do this in real time with you in California and me in Georgia, while
Hmm.
you model a high poly sculpt of a character for our cartoon that we're working on across the country, right,
Hmm.
in real time, and then people who want to can watch it live or catch it in an archived state, right?
So what
Um,
you're telling me is we're still in old man mode, is what you're
well, I
saying.
mean, I think tonight is going to be an old man night. Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah.
I think
That's what
there's
that's
no
what I'm getting
escaping it at
from
this
this.
point because I look at
Yeah.
this and I'm sort of filled with wonder to a certain extent, and I wonder like do if we show this to my niece and nephew, would they be impressed or would they go, yeah, so?
Well, I think I think with any type of creative creative endeavor, it's always gonna be around. That's why, like Amit and I were watching a show on HBO Max called The Great Pottery Throwdown, and pottery's been with us since the gazillion eons of time, and yet
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Mm-hmm.
TV show about it. It's one of the oldest forms of doing art.
That's
So
true. That's
I
true.
think if you're doing something creative, there's always gonna be a market and an audience for that. So
Well, I'm
uh,
I'm I'm glad to know that. I just wonder, I guess like it's the larger conversation where you can't like saying that you understand nonlinear editing doesn't mean anything on a resume anymore because
mhm,
if you use TikTok, then you understand nonlinear editing, right? Like,
yeah, but it just happens to be called TikTok versus
right.
no.
It's
Yeah,
it's just it's just a low fidelity nonlinear editing tool that has a nice user interface that makes it easy for people to use that technology, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when George Lucas had a hand in inventing the very concept of nonlinear editing, right?
mhm,
And now anybody can do it right from their cell phone, and it's I find it infinitely both cool and overwhelming and um, like just impressive and all of these adjectives.
mhm,
um,
mhm,
and then I look at my niece who turns on TikTok and makes her TikTok video using these same tools that within my lifespan were considered a
yeah,
technological revolution, right? And she
yeah,
does it, and she puts as much attention and finds it as novel as I do putting a sandwich in the microwave, right?
yeah. And I think no matter what, that'll always kind of be the case in some. And as technology improves, uh, it's just ready and available for people to use it. But the skill of how people use it is going to be the question at that after that. Like
Right.
what are they doing with it? I
Right, and
mean,
I totally agree with you, and that was literally my next point. Like, I think ultimately it's a really good thing, the democratization of this type
yeah,
of technology. I mean, it's a double edged sword to a certain extent because you get a lot more garbage when everybody can
yes,
do it. You get a lot more garbage, but by the same token, when you lower the bar, um, highly creative people that may not be technically minded, right,
hmm,
can now express their creativity when the technological bar is lowered. And so people who may have had great ideas but couldn't execute them because the technology requirement was too high can now execute those creative notions because that variable has been removed from the equation.
on
Um,
top of that, then there's also economics that plays a role too. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
some people, you don't want to get too caught up in it, but Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, I don't know what their upbringing was, but they had access to that stuff, um, in their 20s, whereas there's somebody with a story in a poor area of the country that didn't, and they have just as many good stories as those two guys did, but they're terrific storytellers, and so they had a chance to
Yeah.
kind of monopolize is probably more of a vilifying type of word, but Spielberg was what was it in the 80s and 90s as well as Lucas. Like they were taking ads out congratulating each other, during that time,
Yeah.
saying, "How congrats, you beat my record." But you didn't see other directors come out until much much later when technology was a little bit more readily available and situations where economics didn't have much of a role to get access to it. And
No,
now
I
we see
agree.
all these incredible storytellers now from all walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
all over the world, which is it's a great time. It's a golden age for tech in that
Mm-hmm.
regard. So yes, your niece can just enjoy, edit, and maybe something will spark her interest a little bit. Who knows? Maybe she's a storyteller waiting inside too. We won't know, but she's got to go through all this stuff and make a bunch of stuff first until we know, if she's got that bug or not. I don't know. It's me just ranting a little bit, I guess, but
No, I think you're right, and I think going back to Lucas and Spielberg, right? I mean, the Avid tools, is sort of the early days of those
yeah,
non. I mean, I worked at a company that bought an Avid setup, and it was 10 grand. Like it
yeah,
was, so I mean, it was definitely something that only the elites got to have access to, right?
yep, hmm,
And now you get basic nonlinear editing for free. I mean, for free.
yeah,
um,
it's true. Yeah,
and so I wholeheartedly agreed with you with the lowering the economic bar, is sort of the 1-2 punch, right? Lowering the technology bar and then lowering the economic bar. I mean, yeah, the
hmm,
number of voices who now have an opportunity to express their creativity is a tenfold, more than tenfold,
yeah,
what it was
yeah,
even 30 years ago.
yeah. So I mean, more power to the human race, I guess. I think it's great, but
Every once in a while, they do something.
yeah, yeah. But I do agree with you though. I mean, you do have to sift through a lot of crap now, though.
And that's the
Sometimes.
that's the underside of it, and I don't know what to do about that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that eventually, as the technology matures, you'll see people self-editing and self-filtering, so that the that the garbage will still exist, but we will have better built-in filters and editors, uh, that sort of handles it automatically, and it falls to the background. It's actually, Neil Stevenson is a science fiction author and a futurist,
Hmm.
and he's amazing. I love him. I mean, he writes these books that are too long, uh,
Okay.
but I love the voice that he writes in, his ethereal voice. That it
Hmm.
doesn't matter to me. Like, fine, you want to write an 800-page book? Great, awesome. I'm here. I'm ready for it.
Hmm.
Um, but he's a brilliant futurist. I mean, he predicted things like the modern, concept of the internet, the notion of, internet avatars, being an extension of self, but also
Oh,
providing a
really?
level of anonymity. Yeah.
Interesting.
He's his latest book deals with the concept of, a digital reality, a digital afterlife, right? That's what his entire most recent book is about.
Okay.
And this one concept that really, like, I think is really cool, and he's, experimented with this notion, in multiple books at this point, but it's the notion of this reality where there's just a layer of garbage information that permeates the internet at all time, right?
Uh-huh. Which feels like now.
Yeah, exactly. But humanity developed this sort of middleware solution that filters out the, as he calls it, he spells it in one of his speculative fiction novels, Bullshit.
So is it an acronym of some sort? Is that what
No,
that's
it's
all about?
not. It's a joke. It's a
Okay.
gag. that's not worth explaining. It is
Okay.
funny if you read it in the context of the book. The book is
Sure.
called Anathem, but he
Yeah.
revisits that notion in his latest book, Fall. But in this one, it's far less. It's not as well. Anathem takes place in an alternate dimension, but Fall takes place in our reality, a near future version of our reality. And
Mhm.
rather than an AI subsystem that does the filtering, you hire a human editor who edits out all the garbage and only lets you see what you want to see.
Huh.
It's really really fascinating, and I think he's dead on. I think that the a lot of the challenges that we're having in our modern technology, social culture space is because we don't edit ourselves enough, right?
Hmm.
And I think that when we solve that problem and we're inundated with less information all of the time,
Hmm.
that it will cool the psyches, our collective psyches, a little
Hmm.
bit. Um, so yeah, that was again my turn to rant, I guess. But it's just an interesting, it's a thought experiment that Stevenson has been playing with for many years.
Huh. Sounds interesting. I mean, have you read a lot of his books?
I've read everything but Seven Eves, actually. Even the ones that he wrote under a pseudonym because he co-wrote it with his dad or cousin or something, Stephen Bury.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like I first read his I think it was his debut novel, Snow Crash. That came out when I was still in high school. Like that's how long ago. That's how long he's been writing. So,
Have
25
any of
years or
his
more.
books become movies?
No, believe it or not. Which is a mystery to me because Snow Crash would be like I think it would break box office records because not only is it this really awesome exploration of near future tech and VR and just like what does culture look like in the VR space, right? The
Hmm.
VR internet basically.
Hmm.
Um, but it's also like this really really cool conversation of linguistics and language, but it's set with this really cool action background storyline, right? um, and it's great. And Fall, uh, which is basically it's like World of Warcraft, but in VR. World of Warcraft, the digital afterlife version,
Yeah.
would be a great book, but it would have to be more like a mini series. I feel like
Hmm.
because at like 800 pages long, it would be very difficult to tell all that in even a 3 hour long movie.
Hmm.
Um, and Read Me, which is a came out before and follows the continuation of that storyline. Um, it's like it literally is a techno thriller, like a globe spanning techno thriller.
Hmm.
It's phenomenal. I mean, it's really good. It's a real page turner. Um, but yeah, yeah, he's my favorite author. I could go on. Well, one of my favorite authors. I could go on about Stevenson for probably ever.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, so
I
I
haven't.
think it's just because his books are too long to make into movies.
Yeah, I haven't read a good sci-fi book, and I don't know how long. I don't think I ever. All the sci-fi media I've ever consumed was all movie-wise. I mean, I've read a lot of fantasy books, like dragons and D&D style.
Mm-hmm.
Dragonlance. I'm well versed in that stuff, but well, not by today's standards, but back in the 80s and 90s, used to read quite a bit. But yeah, I never could never get into the sci-fi genre as much as I loved seeing them or
Mm-hmm.
consuming them as far as TV is concerned. So sometimes I feel like I missed the boat on that. Like even reading like Isaac Asimov stuff or something like that. I just feel like kind of just missed out on some really good classic stuff.
It's never too late. I mean, I can give you a couple of
Yeah,
recommendations. I mean, Ray Bradbury is a singular voice, obviously, but
yeah,
and he
yeah.
might be a good kind of segue into the science fiction space because he actually never, at least by his own claims, considered himself a science fiction writer. So, like
Uh-huh.
his books were set on Venus and Mars before we really understood what those planets were like. Um, but because he was writing in the 50s and the 60s,
Yeah.
early 60s. Um, but you know, despite the sort of sci-fi tropes, setting tropes, he always considered himself more of a fantasy author.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, Fahrenheit 451 is a classic. Um, and then you know, Asimov, obviously, the Foundation trilogy is phenomenal. I never really got into the iRobot
Hmm.
universe, but I read the entire Foundation trilogy, and it was, you know, phenomenal. And then there's Robert Heinlein, who
Hmm.
is a must read. I mean, Stranger in a Strange Land is still one of my favorite science fiction books of all time.
Yeah, see, I remember I know his name too. I
Yeah.
mean,
Philip K. Dick is another
yeah,
phenomenal. Like, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I mean, Hollywood loves Philip K. Dick. They more of his short stories and novels have been turned into movies than just about any other science fiction author.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, I could give you a list, and then you could get more contemporary too with Orson Scott Card and Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead. Although I'd probably stop on that and maybe read Ender's Shadow, but that's about it.
Did you watch? I mean, sorry, did you read all the Ender's Game stuff?
I read Ender's Game, which was phenomenal, and Speaker of the Dead, which was phenomenal. I never read Xeno, the third book, which was what it's called. Oh, I don't remember what the third book is. It's Xeno something. I don't remember what the third book is called. Um, and I never read the Ender's Shadow series. So yeah, I've not read a lot of Orson Scott Card stuff. Just Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead. But unfortunately, um, his faith really started to seep into his writing,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it stopped being speculative science fiction and it started becoming more of an allegory for religion. And
yeah,
I'm not opposed to religious allegories, but I don't have any association with the Mormon faith, so it's really hard to get into.
yeah. It's like a foreign thing to you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's what I kind of heard was the biggest critique on his stuff is it kind of got kind of weird.
yeah. Very, very, very preachy, which I don't like
Yeah,
either. Like, I'm not a huge fan of preachy.
yeah.
Um,
But I saw the movie Ender's Game, I guess, or whatever it's called. It was
it
entertaining.
it was,
That,
yeah.
that
It's not it it
it's not
pales
indicative
in
of the book.
comparison to the
Oh,
book,
okay.
and I know that makes me sound like such an elitist, but it really is true. They really had to cut a lot out of the movie to make it work as a movie.
Uh huh.
Um, the twist and the reveal of everything that occurs is much it's handled much better in the book.
Okay.
And it you know the Orson Scott Card actually, as he tells it, started by trying to write Speaker for the Dead, um, but couldn't wrap his hand around the philosophical conversation that he wanted to have there because he didn't fully understand the character of Ender. Um,
Okay.
and so he went and he wrote um, a short story that was called Ender's Game to help him understand Ender
Explore it.
more. Right.
That's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Because you always get this impression that writers have all the answers.
Yeah.
And it's clearly not the case if you've watched Lost or something like that. But
Right.
anyway,
Loss will disabuse you of that notion
yeah,
very
yeah.
quickly.
But that's cool that he found a creative way of doing it without wasting uh, an audience member's time.
Yeah.
Um, that's really cool. Even though I didn't read it, but
Yeah.
from what
And
you're
then
telling.
he took the Ender's Game short story and then expanded that into a book. And
Mm-hmm.
then he was able to then write Speaker for the Dead.
That's pretty
At
cool.
least those are sort of the thought experiments that he had to do to get to a headspace where he could have the conversation he wanted to have in Speaker for the Dead. And it's funny, like I have friends who've read Ender's Game and then tried to read Speaker for the Dead and was like, what is this? It's
Jeez.
a very different book. Like, Ender's Game is full of action and conspiracy and intrigue and space travel, and
Mm-hmm.
Speaker for the Dead takes place almost completely on a single planet, and the whole thing is a philosophical conversation of um, if life proceeds one way and it's in direct conflict with how a separate form of life proceeds, is there such a thing as right and wrong? Is there such a thing as
Oh,
um,
geez.
yeah, it's a very very heady topic, but it's an excellent book. I mean, I might actually like Speaker for the Dead more than Ender's Game, but I really like both of those books.
Hmm.
Um, wow, this really turned into a deep dive of Eric's thought on science fiction. So
I'm glad because, like I said, I'm always eager to hear about what's going on as far as in a genre that I enjoy that I don't get a chance. There's not enough time in the day to enjoy it as long fully. I guess what I'm
yeah,
saying. But,
yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, if I were going to recommend one book, it's a super quick read. It's not it's science fiction, but it's not like heady, serious science fiction. It's one of my favorite books ever written in the history of books. Is
okay.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy
Oh
by
yeah,
Douglas
yeah. You
Adams.
always you always talk about this one.
I've read
Yeah, you love this one.
I've read all five of those books, and it's sort of like the Back to the Future trilogy. Like I've never watched the first Back to the Future and then not gone. Well, now I have to watch two and three. I
Uh
can't read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy without then proceeding to read all five of the books.
huh.
And
That's funny.
I've read it maybe five times at this point, which is
Hmm.
ridiculous given that all five books is like 800 pages or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, it's closer to 500, but still, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Um, it's a riot. It's hilarious. It's a wonderful metaphor on the confusing reality of being a human being. It's also really good sci-fi. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, highly recommend Hitchhiker's Guide. At least the first one, even if you don't read any of the other ones. Pick up a copy of the
Mhm.
first one. It's like 250 pages. You can get through it in an afternoon. It's amazing.
Keep that under advisement. I know that. What about the movies? Like with
You know, the one thing I loved is that they respected Douglas Adams and was like, you know what, we're going to take these ideas and just make a fun movie.
uh-huh.
Um, uh, and because that's what Douglas Adams did in all the different versions of Hitchhikers, the book, the radio dramas, the television series.
Uh,
The story was never the same. It always changed depending on what medium he was telling the story in. And the
uh-huh.
central themes stayed the same, but the details of the story shifted. So you know, I like the fact that they played with that. Um, uh, I thought the movie was okay. I thought it could be better.
Hmm.
Um, and it's the challenge that Alan Moore, I think, rightly stated when I think it was an overreaction, but when he asked that his name be removed from the Watchmen movie, um, he
Yeah.
said that he wrote Watchmen with the intention of it being a comic book. And
Uh-huh.
if he were going to write it with the intention of it being a movie, he would have written it differently. So the idea that Zack Snyder was basically using his comic book as a storyboard to make his movie didn't make any sense to him,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I think, and while Douglas Adams would never, you know, he was up and you know he unfortunately died before the movie finally came out, but
Hmm.
he was totally on board with them just playing with the story and making it their own and having fun with it.
Hmm.
Um, but ultimately, I feel like it's a property that has to have Douglas Adams' voice for it to work,
Hmm.
um, because he wrote it each time specifically for the medium that he was telling the story in. Right, the
Hmm.
book version is written in a particular way because that's what worked best for the books. The radio drama version was written for a radio drama, right?
Hmm.
And I just don't personally think that the movie was ever going to truly capture the soul of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy unless Douglas Adams was the one writing the screenplay.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not an elitist or anything.
Well, it's very common to hear the book is better than the than the movie. Quite often. So because you
Yeah.
can have so much more detail into it. So that's you're pretty much echoing back to that old sentiment.
What can I say? I'm a stereotype wrapped in a turkey wrapped in bacon, I guess. I don't know. I haven't had dinner yet. I apologize.
Neither have I. That sounds good though.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, but well, we're right at 30 minutes here. You definitely cleaned up the sculpt. I mean, I think I like it a lot.
I think I'm gonna, like I'm at a stage where if I keep working on it, I'm gonna rework it. I think it's good enough.
I think so.
So
What I think is it's definitely at a point where you should start working on taking it into color and taking it
yeah,
into the shading technology and seeing how it
yeah.
looks.
So I'll be doing that probably next week. I'll start doing that. It doesn't look exactly like the sketch, but it's okay. My sketch was never meant to be a tight sketch anyway. I'm happy with the model. I think it conveys what we want Tinsel to convey. So that's the main thing. We're always kind of broad brush stroking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if I want to be nitpicky, I could just go, oh, this doesn't look like this part of the sketch or this. No, this is fine. I'm happy with this. So
Excellent.
yeah, we'll move into more stuff next week. I think.
Sounds good to me.
Or
And
as
yeah, I'll find an entire another genre of literature that I can bore people with.
I just remembered. Does Jurassic Park count as a science fiction book?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's
Yeah, so
science
that's one I
fiction
read.
doesn't have to be set in some sort of distant future, right?
Yeah, so I would say Jurassic Park. That was one good. That was my last good science fiction book I read that I
Well,
enjoyed.
you went out with a good one. The
Yeah,
original Jurassic Park it still holds up. If you haven't read
it's
it
great.
recently, it's a Michael Crichton at his best. Just he really straddled the line between interesting topics of conversation, and then just writing movies that were ready made for Hollywood
Yeah,
scripts.
yeah, it's really weird, but he was. You know that he was the director of the original, way back in the day, Westworld
Oh yeah, he
movie
wrote the
with
script. Yeah,
Yul Brynner, wasn't it? Like, what a
yep.
classic movie.
I know, and that was Crichton. Yeah, he wrote the screenplay for it. Did you know he wrote the screenplay for Twister?
No, but
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't really care for Twister, so that's why I just didn't
I had
find
to
it
bring you
appealing.
down a little bit. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, you did. It's all right. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, we'll add
Wow,
some
what a way to end. I'm sorry. That was a real downer.
yeah, like thanks, Eric.
Yeah, you're
We were
welcome.
we
I'm
were ending on
sorry.
Jurassic Park, but Twister and the guy's belt buckle saving him. It's like,
I know.
okay,
All
if
right.
you want, Eric, if that's what you want.
Well, Tinsel looks great. There we go. Something
Okay, no,
positive.
man.
Tinsel looks
Thanks a
great.
lot for that. Yeah, but cool. So
Okay.
we'll add some more stuff to her next week and keep going. So,
Fantastic. All right. Well, have a good night, James. Stay safe. Everybody stay safe out there. We'll see you next week.
bye, everybody. Good night.
Good night.